for me, it's a hobby, right? Like don't want to do cards 24/7, right? Like it's not my life. The selling part of it for me is not enjoyable. The rest of us that like just want to rip or they want to buy into breaks or like whatever, and then they just want to get some money back from that so that they can buy cool cards that they like. Utilize a service like this rather than just sitting on them and watching them go to zero, right? I mean, get something out of them.
This is GoodSellas, a podcast for collectors who want to learn how to sell the cards they don't want so they can get their hands on the cards they need. In every episode, we uncover the secrets collectors use to move their cards so you can sell more and sell faster. Let's get started.
Hey, this is JB. I'm the CEO of Stack and your host for this episode of GoodSellas. GoodSellas is brought to you by Stack, an app where you can run and launch Stack sales directly from your phone. Using Stack, collectors will claim what they want from your sale, and then Stack will automatically reconcile who claimed what, send out your totals, collect payment, and create the labels so that after a sale, all you have to do is hit print and drop your package at the post office. One of the biggest issues for anyone and pretty much everyone in the hobby is time. I just mentioned my company Stack, and really that's what we set out to solve. It's not so much a selling issue as much as it's a time issue. It's something we really all suffer from. So today I brought on Brooks Hester. Brooks reached out to me recently and told me about how he's been consigning a ton of his cards. And for me, I'd always thought consignment, and I think of big auction houses like Golden or Heritage or something like that. But Brooks told me he was sending all sorts of stuff all the way down to $10 per card. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. What is consignment? How can you use it? And what cards, if any, that you have would be viable for consignment? So with that, Brooks, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so like a lot of people in the hobby, you have a life outside of cards. You have a young daughter, a wife, a job. From my understanding, you're basically a professional Valorant player. So what led you to look into alternatives to selling your cards instead of you doing it yourself?
Yeah, I think you hit on the big one. For me, it's mostly just the time, right? People don't realize, and I didn't realize, just how much like the selling is one thing, but it's all the stuff after, right? It just takes up so much time and it's so much effort, especially like you and I are mostly on Twitter, but you think about like all these other platforms too. There's just so much effort that goes into moving a card nowadays, unless you just go the eBay route, right? Which is kind of one avenue you can take. But for those of us that like to sell on social platforms, you know all the pain of this, you do big sales. But for me, when I found consignment, and I was like you, like I heard about consignment for years and I was just like, oh, what, not for me, right? Whatever. Like those guys take a big percentage. Like I have no issue. I have no interest in that. But when I learned a little bit more about it, it's so easy, right? I put cards in a box. I send them to them. They list them. I get paid. Done. End of story.
So before we get into the actual process of consigning your cards, can you explain a little bit what consignment is to the audience that may not know?
Yeah, it's mostly just a company, or it could be a single person, but most of these guys do have multiple employees that are selling cards on your behalf. And obviously they take a cut of that, but they do all the work, right? They take your cards, they list them, most of the time on eBay, but they do some social selling as well. They handle all the shipping. If there's any issues with returns or anything, they handle all of that. And then after all that process is complete, they usually pay you out in one lump sum. So it's just kind of a one-stop shop for you, versus you having to individually sell, 50, 100 cards, whatever it is.
Okay. And so from my understanding, you've been using DC Sports 87.
That's right.
Local here to Virginia. My business partner actually lives in the same town, Glen Allen, that DC Sports 87 is. I'm about 2 hours north of them. So I'd always seen DC Sports 87 and I don't know, even with it being local, I never really looked into it, but I want to talk to you about how it works. So what values or types of cards are they willing to accept?
That's a good question. From my understanding, all the times I've worked with them, I think they encourage you to it's at your discretion. I think technically they'll list anything you send them, but I think they try to have you make a conscious effort for it to be kind of hits, right? So numbered cards, autographs, anything of that nature. My rule of thumb is really like $5 and above. I try not to send any base cards or, a lot of times you see like numbered vet stuff that is going to sell for $1. Like it just is what it is. There's probably a different platform and a method for selling those, but $5 and above hits, numbered stuff, autographs, patches, whatever, all the way up to, they'll take the highest value card that you have.
Yeah, so like stay away from like a Tristan Thompson.
Yeah, like seventh year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, so let's say someone is a first-time customer. They're sitting on a bunch of cards right now, as we all are. How does it work for a first-time customer? What do they have to do?
Yeah, it's super easy. So, in fact, I was skeptical at how easy it was. I was like, there's no way this actually works, but it does. You go to their website, there's like a little postcard looking thing you print off, and it's just your information, really, your name, phone number, your address, and your email. You package up all your cards in a box. I use a Postal Service flat rate box. You can put in all your cards, right? Package them nice and secure. You fill out the little postcard, you put it on top, you ship it to them, and then they email you a link to a personalized portal, and you can actually see, like for me right now, I've got 4 or 5 different orders that are kind of in the queue, and they give you like an estimated date of upload. I think right now it's 13 to 15 business days from when they receive them, but you can actually see, hey, we've received your cards. Here's the estimated upload date. And then when they actually upload them, you'll get a link that's personalized to you on eBay where you can go see all the listings and follow the auctions.
And as I'm sure our audience knows, I know, and no selling platform is perfect. And there are downsides to these things. And I think we've all seen that as things, if you find something that's good, the world is not quiet about it, as we are doing a podcast on this very topic that is then going to go out and tell more people about DC Sports 87. And they, of course, have labor and people who are there are people doing the work that we don't want to do. So right now, and maybe you can talk about the timelines, how long does it take your cards to get listed by them?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good point, right? This is where you kind of have to use your best judgment. If you're trying to sell things seasonally or around certain dates, this process is probably not the best because you don't really control it, right? From my understanding with them, it's kind of a first come, first serve. They also have a criteria like under 20 cards and then over 20 cards and above. Obviously, the under 20 cards is easier for them to take pictures, do listings. So those groups are faster. Whereas if you send, like I usually send like 100 cards at a time. So it takes a while for that to kind of process. But from start to finish, usually from when I send a package and it arrives, it's generally 2 to 3 weeks before it gets listed. And then I think they list everything on 5-day auctions starting at 99 cents. So, in total from start to finish, when you ship it from your house to when you get paid, probably about a month in total.
Yeah. And something that, like I mentioned, we've all seen in the hobby, especially during the boom, is if people are finding easier ways to do things, ways to make money. We watched it with PSA get completely overrun. We watched it with ComC get completely overrun, where they were like receiving way more than they could process. So something that I've seen, like I mentioned in my intro, I talked to Brooks and told me about DC87. I'm suffering from a lot of the same issues. So I'm using DC87 now. But something that I've seen, I've been using them for, I think, a week.
Yeah.
And a week ago, when I first logged into the website for card orders over 20 cards, it was 11 days. Since then, I watched it go to 12. I watched it go to 13, and then I watched it nicely skip 14 business days and go directly to 15 business days. So if you think about it may seem trivial right now. Okay, right? We've increased 4 business days, but conversely, that's like 25% increase in 1 week.
Yeah.
Do you have concern that too many people are using this method of selling?
I do. I am concerned because there's a couple other like DC87 guys that are similar, right? In my view, I like them best because of the portal they have, and operationally, it just fits me. But there are a couple others out there, but I am concerned that there's not enough, right? I think, like you mentioned, in this day and age, people are looking for simplicity and they're looking for the easiest way to make money, right? And ultimately, simplicity a lot of times leads to that, right? And so I am concerned that they could get overwhelmed. I think we're seeing some of that right now. National just happened. There's, baseball playoffs coming up, so people will list cards in. Basketball's about to start, so people want to be listing cards in. Football just started, so people want to be listing cards. So I think right now, I am a little bit concerned, but I think all of those sports kind of coming together maybe explain some of that. We'll see. I've gone through 3 orders with them now. I think I have orders 4 and 5 in the system. Me personally, it wouldn't bother me too much unless it gets out to like 30 business days, right? At that point, I'm like, maybe I'll do something different.
Which is more like 45 days for the audience,
right?
Exactly. I think so. My main our other job that I do, which is creative services. We tell people we deliver in 7 business days.
Yep.
I think people sometimes forget that means about a week and a half, and they have that on there. And I think people sometimes overlook that and say, oh, 10 days, that's nothing. Well, when we go from 10 to 11 to 15 business days, you're really looking at 3 to 4 weeks, most likely.
It's always funny we talk about business days, just as a sidebar, like with PSA, right? People get real sideways with like, oh, it's been 14 days. And it's like, well, they say business days. Did you count business days? And they're like, no. And you're like, well, you got to read the fine print, bud. Like business days aren't Saturday and Sunday or holidays.
And that's my big concern. You bring up PSA. My big concern with DC87 and these consignment services is I've really seen a rise in them. I think I see guys like our friend over at Gem Mint Submissions, Ronald. He's always I think he calls him Uncle Rick or something, referring to Probstein. And I've worked through Probstein before, and that was for me. And you mentioned the DC87 portal. Like I hated working through Rick Probstein. Like he did not tell me where my card was. I mean, you send your stuff into a black hole and basically
hope for the best.
You cross your fingers and hope for the best. And I sent, at the time, my biggest card that I had ever pulled. It was like mid boom. The biggest product to come out during the boom was Topps Chrome with Luis Robert in it. That was the biggest. That was like peak. Other maybe basketball too, like the Zion stuff. But if you look at baseball, like no one was even talking about Bowman at the time. It was Topps Chrome, who can pull Luis Robert, and I pulled one of his inserts, Superfractor, and it was like the best day of my life, right? And so I get the card and I send it off to Rick, and I have no idea where my card is. I have no idea what's happening, when it's going to be listed, and boom, I just saw it pop up on eBay, like anyone else would find it, and it was terrible. And so since then, I've stayed away from consignment myself because that was like such a bad experience for me. And then when you told me DC87 has, the portal, which I've seen, I mean, it's nothing spectacular, but it's transparency, I think, which is what we're looking for on our stuff. Have you tried any other consignment services, or is DC87 the only one you
haven't, because of the reasons you mentioned. Like, I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but like even when I'm sending $10, $15, $20 cards, like I want to have an idea of where they're at during the process, right? Like it matters to me. There are people out there, right, that use Probstein and they send their cards off and they don't care. They're like, I'll just pay me eventually, right? Put them up for listing eventually and I'll get paid like sometime in the next 3 months. I'm not one of those people, right? Like I want to know you've received it, they're listed, like all the steps, right? And so there's another one on Instagram that's pretty big. I think it's like Consign with MC or something. I don't know what the MC stands for, but anyway, I know a couple guys that use them. And I think they're similar to Probstein, right? Where you just send the cards and they pop up and you get paid at some point. So I have not used anyone else because of those reasons. I do think we will see more consignment services popping up. And I do think that some of this competition is good. I think it will just drive these guys to have to be more accountable to their customers. Like the issue, some of the issues you mentioned with Probstein, right? I mean, we've seen those echoed on multiple social platforms across multiple sellers, right? People want, especially with big cards, man, people want some transparency and they want some accountability. Even when you talk about like Golden recently and the lack of promotion or marketing around certain cards, and is there favoritism towards certain things? Is there not? I mean, people want to know that, I'm selling this big card or really any card and that they're being taken care of.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't necessarily know that Consignment has always done that, but I think the more competition that pops up will drive to an increased awareness around that. That's what I hope, because I really like Consignment. I think it's an easy way to sell.
Yeah, and I think probably what we're going to see is a very weird grading-esque run like we saw with the
Yeah.
You're gonna hear coming up all sorts of people getting taken for their cards. People are going to send things off. They're never going to see money. And I think, for me, it's the reason I want that control is because I actually, and probably like you, and we talk about this kind of stuff to each other. I know how difficult it is to be organized, and I just don't trust any of these. If you're receiving hundreds, if not thousands of packages with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cards without transparency, I frankly just don't believe you. Like, you're going to tell me that none of my stuff is going to get lost. Like, I am probably one of the more organized hobby people, based on basements I've seen, card rooms I've seen. I try to, have a handle on where pretty much everything that I have is, and I just refuse to believe that there are these companies that literally, you don't have to have any sort of experience to say, Brooks, tomorrow you could announce Brooks Consignment, send me your cards. I'll list them on eBay for you. It takes nothing to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree. You got to be careful, right? I mean, certainly, and that, again, this goes back to just another reason I use these guys is they have a reputation for doing the right things. But I mean, your point is extremely valid. I mean, people don't understand either the intake volume that these guys have. I mean, it's thousands, if not, whatever a day. I mean, and people are like, oh, well, the quality of their pictures, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't realize how much time it takes to take 1,500 pictures a day of cards, right? Multiplied by 2 for front and back. Then you've got to go list them all, right? They've got to do titles. They've got to do descriptions for everything. So it's a lot of work, right? I mean, the percentage of cut those guys take, I happily pay for, because for me, like, it's stuff I don't want to do. But your point is extremely valid, right? I mean, I do think there are people that will get taken, right? So you got to be cognizant of who you trust in this hobby. I mean, look, there's a lot of money in the card collecting hobby, and with a lot of money always comes bad actors looking to take advantage of that and make a quick buck and get out, right? So Consignment is going to be no different.
Yeah, and I would definitely recommend that before anybody consigns, really look into who you're consigning with, because for me, I sent that card off to Probstein, who, again, is probably one of the bigger players, and I only trusted him because I reached out to a bunch of people, said, who have you used? I did some references, but like on the surface, it looks like it could. He could just, vanish
Disappear.
one day and have, millions. But at the same time, I saw his booth at the National. He's got big cards there. So just be careful with who you're sending. So one of the things that you mentioned were fees, which I actually was very pleasantly surprised when I did originally consign with Probstein. I had no idea that basically these consignment services get their own types of fees from, I guess, eBay, or not really. I'm actually not really sure how it works, but can you talk a little bit about the fees? And you may not know all of them off the top of your head, but generally speaking, how the fees work.
Yeah, so I think I don't know, I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but I know it's for a majority. I think they take anywhere from 80 to 85% of the sale price, and then I think each listing costs you like 40 or 50 cents, just like a flat rate. And then depending on like I think if you sell more than it's more than like a $5,000 sale, they take 97%, or you get 97%. They don't take 97%. So
yeah, all right. I got it right here. So for a $5,000 card, you get 97%, which, compare that to eBay, I mean, that's nuts.
Yeah.
1,000 to 5,000, you get 90%, which again, still more than eBay. $25 to 1,000, you get 85%, which is probably right around eBay. And then 50-cent fee per sale. $10 to $25, you get 80%. But then think about that though, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about. $10 to $25. If you send 50 $10 to $25 cards and you get 80%, then you're paying for your time.
That's right.
And then they've got 99 cents to $10, you get 80%, but it's 75 cents per sale. So they're trying to really incentivize away from those. They're like, if you must.
If you must, we'll do it. We'll list your $3 card. But I mean, for me, the way I look at it is, a $5 card, and this is not like to be pretentious at all. So I said this to someone the other day, and they're like, "Oh, that's very high and mighty of you," and like that's not how I mean it. But if I've got a box of $5 cards, they're going to sit on my desk for a year. Like, I'm just not going to take the time to go list a bunch of $5 cards
and likely be worth $2,
and likely be worth $2
by the time you look at them, because those types of cards usually aren't the ones that are really increasing in value, because products are going to be open, they're going to go down in value, and no one's really going to want them.
So in my mind, any money I get from them, so if I send in a DC-87, any money I get from them is more money than I would have gotten otherwise. Right now, there are people out there on Twitter, whatever, that they want to maximize every penny, right? Okay, great. This isn't for you, right? But for a majority of people that have kids, they have families, animals, whatever, and they just don't have time to list $105 cards, right? This is a way you can get something out of those cards versus them sitting on your desk, depreciating by 75% over the next year, and you get nothing for them.
Okay, and not really counterpoint, same point. We also watch people, those people that you mentioned that want to maximize every dollar. We watch them get zero for things constantly. They want to they want their full value. And so then they take nothing. I won't call them out by name or anything, but we all know the Wander Franco Superfractor summer camp card that was
on the longest Dutch auction ever.
Yeah, I mean, had he listed, let's say he had sent, let's just use that as an example. The first time it was listed, I think it was like $10,000 or $15,000.
I think it was like 12, 12 and a half or something.
Somewhere around there. And had he auctioned that, let's say through a consignment service or an auction house or something, even just did it himself, he probably gets 6, 7, 8, maybe, that was when Franco was the hottest player in the world. We were heading into the season. He's outselling every young player from, Tatis to Soto to Acuna. And instead, he holds it and wants to maximize, keeps posting it on Twitter in this case. And now I think the last time I saw it, it's like 6,300. He could have had 6,300 8 months ago, easy. And so I think, one of the things here is trying to move that inventory to recoup some funds and then do whatever you want with them, go buy a card that you want, put it in your bank account and do whatever, take a
there's so many different types. I mean, it's a good point, right? Because there's so many different types of collectors, right? A lot of times people pull these big cards, and like you said, I'm guilty of this. I have a big card right now that I will I'll hold to zero.
Well, okay, but slight difference.
It is
we'll get into it.
It is different.
That Bowman is its own beast. He has
it is a little bit different, right? Insert versus whatever.
And you have the shiny the shiny thing at the end of the pot of gold at the end of the tunnel, which is
it is
end of the rainbow. Thank you.
It is different, but
where if he if he goes to the majors, then you list it for auction, and then that's a big thing. But I hear you.
there, it's a good point, right? And it's kind of a separate. We could probably do a whole friggin' podcast on the economics of the hobby and when to sell, when to hold, when to buy. Or whatever,
I'm not your guy for that. I promise.
Me neither. But
that's why I'm using DC87. I'm like, I don't know,
Yeah.
just list them, man. Whatever.
It is. It's just. I mean, ultimately, look, it's a simplicity thing, right? And it's a way for those of us that don't. I mean, look, for me, it's a hobby, right? Like I don't want to do cards 24/7, right? Like it's not my life. It's the selling part of it for me is not enjoyable, right? I mean, for some people it is. Like, and for you, cool. For those of you that that's your thing, like that's awesome. Good for you. Like have fun. But for the rest of us that like just want to rip or they want to buy into breaks or like whatever, and then they just want to get some money back from that so that they can buy cool cards that they like. Utilize a service like this rather than just sitting on them and watching them go to zero, right? I mean, get something out of them.
Yeah.
That's my whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, I ripped 3 boxes of Finest Flashbacks yesterday, and I'm just like, I pulled, so like a great example is like a Tony Gwynn, which is the vets in that are short print, or the retired vets are short prints.
Right. Yep.
And so is a Tony Gwynn out of 50. That's like, I don't know, $15, $20 card, 30 at best. I'm like, perfect DC87 card. Like, I'm not going to post this on Twitter and be like, please, will someone, I'm not going to, I'm frankly not going to
You post that card on Twitter, you're going to post it 5 times and you're not going to get any bites on. I mean, it's just not a card, right? Like if you rip up Finest Flashbacks this year, right? What you're looking for is like J-Rod or like a Griffey number to 5, or there's certain cards, right? Anything else that you pull is you're going to have a very specific buyer, right? And people just, especially on social media, we're kind of in like a little bit of an echo chamber. People don't realize really how small the audience is compared to like eBay, right? And that's a perfect card for consignment, right? Where if you post on Twitter, you're not going to get any hits. Just send it off. Like let somebody else do the work, get a bunch of eyes on it, sell it for your $15, $20 and move on, right? Like there's no point in sitting on that card and trying to squeeze $20 out of it.
Yeah, like
the amount of work you're gonna have to
put in. Let's say it goes at auction for like $18. It's like I don't care. That's 18 more dollars than I would have had otherwise. And also, auctions are just fun. You never know what's going to happen and who wants what.
The other thing, like when you talk about ripping and like the emotions behind it, right? Like when you rip a box, right, and you pull like a Tony Gwynn out of 50, that's a vet, right? Like you get that card, and you're like, okay, cool card, but not what I'm looking for, right? Like it doesn't incite like a lot of good feelings. Like just send it off, man. Like just send it off and get something for it.
And what it's helped me with recently. So recently PSA dropped their prices back to bulk $22. And that would have been a card historically that I would have sent for grading. Because it's more desirable, it's easier to move, especially on a place like Twitter versus Raw. Let's say it gets a PSA 10, right? And then now I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, it's $22 to grade. The card is probably worth $20 to $25.
Yeah.
If it gets a 10, I still have to find a buyer. Yeah. And what is it worth? Like maybe $75 as a PSA 10. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I've kind of changed my approach, which is like, I'm only really grading rookies and vets like that. Like I pulled so like another great one. So I opened a bunch of flashbacks because I got them on Topps website for $200 a piece. I think it was a phenomenal
I agree.
ROI rip.
It's a good product.
Because you could get J-Rod, Wander, Witt, Torkelson. There's a lot of guys in there. For me, CJ Abrams, who I like a lot. And then I think there's one other one, but a lot of big names in there. And so, it was a fun rip. And then I pull a Cal Ripken Jr. out of 20 auto, on card auto. And like, that's a big card. And historically I would have graded it. And then I did this thinking and I'm like, okay, so let's say I do grade this Ripken and it grades out as a 10. Now I have a $500 Cal Ripken Jr. card. Like what do I do with that versus let me just auction it. I'll get like $250, $300 now instead of in 6 months. And if it grades a 9, I'm in the exact same boat having waited 6 months and the desirability is probably down. So this DC87 just consignment situation has made my life a lot easier where I'm like, all right, all like vet pulls that I would have been sad about and been like, okay, I just pulled work, right? Like that's what I pulled. Like the Cal Ripken Jr. card, like I just pulled work. Whereas like if that same card is a Wander or J-Rod, it's like massive.
Different story. Yeah, totally different story.
And so I'm disappointed that my gold out of 50, whatever, or the auto are not only not the guys I was looking for, but also I just pulled work. Now I'm like, okay, I pulled it, but at least I'm going to get like some near-term money for it, which is is like just a nice feeling, I guess.
It is. I mean, and it just adds some money back into the tank, right? Where you like, you and I talked about this a lot, right? Like at the core, I enjoy just ripping product, right? Like new releases of stuff, right? And then this kind of recycle some of that money back into your bank account so you can kind of continue to do the same thing without, like you said, adding a ton of work that for me in the past used to just get frustrating, right? Like in that whole like cycle of ripping and selling whatever, all the work that came afterwards was like, oh man, now I got to go list, especially with like Bowman or something, right? Where you've got just a shit ton of cards. I got to go list all these cards, try to recoup some funds, start all over again, right? But like you said, I mean, you could pull
your Josh Allen is a great example. Brooks recently pulled a Josh Allen tie-dye select, whatever.
Not a rookie, right?
It's like card. And is it done yet? Did it finish?
It did finish. It sold for like $320.
Yeah,
right.
Boom
at auction.
And what did you buy into the break for?
It's like $75 or something, right?
You know, and 5X'd it. Didn't have to worry about doing the work. Right. It's like,
but the thing you mentioned, I think is key, right? Because I had the same thoughts. I was like, okay, if I grade this, right? If it grades a 10, okay, maybe $650 card, right? But you got to think about like, it's a vet. It's a guy that already has a bunch of cards. It's a tie-dye, which people are either very hit or miss on, right? One way or the other. Or I could sell it now, take that money into my pocket and buy something else.
And right? Someone out there wants to buy the raw card because they're thinking,
that's right.
What if it grades a 10 and then I can double my money? And so it actually becomes more valuable now, at least in terms of eyeballs, because people are like, oh, I could grade it and be the one who turns it into a $600 card, which was my kind of thinking on the Cal card. Is like, that card very well may 10 and good for the person who buys it. Maybe they get it 100%, and they sell it for
but it's not going to be me.
Yeah, not going to be me. Yeah.
Because the other thing is in the state of the hobby today with where PSA 9s are, you mentioned this earlier, if at 9s, you're in the same boat that you were, you've spent the time and the money to grade it, the market's probably decreased. People have moved on to the next big product or whatever. So you
Finest Flashbacks 2022 will not be as interesting to people in 6 months as it is today. If people are opening it, it's all over social media. It's on the timeline. People are excited about it.
Today's the 16th of September, and Topps Chrome Baseball just came out today. It's going to surpass Finest Flashbacks a couple weeks after it came out.
Yeah,
it's just the reality of the hobby, right? People are always looking for the next exciting thing. It doesn't mean people won't continue to open flashbacks and there'll be breaks or whatever, but people are going to move on to Topps Chrome, right? And then they're going to move on to Bowman Chrome after that and whatever. So the point is, take the money now while you can, outside of like, you pull a big rookie, send it off to grade, right? Whatever. But vets and like vet color, and even like some of the rookies that are kind of on the lower scale, right? You pull color of those guys. You got to think about who the prospective buyers for this stuff is, right? And is there a big enough buyer pool to get the money you think you can get, right? And if not, take advantage of something while it's hot and get out.
Yeah, which is what I'm doing really. So like I used to be grade everything. If I pulled a decent card, it was off the PSA. And now I've changed that in that I'm only focused on rookies because the rookies can increase at a decent clip. But what I found was, my vets would come back 9s and 10s, and I could have just had, I waited for something that I could have just had the money in that case 18 months ago. and way so more tough. Probably back in the boom. But if we don't, it's not fair. Right. It's never fair to look at boom numbers. So
it's never fair. I mean, the PSA price increases, obviously have altered that reality quite a bit. And then
$8.50 grading was pretty great times though.
That's right. And then as kind of a sidebar to that, PSA 9 values have your card has to gem,
Yeah.
right? I mean, for the most part, they're older product, right? You get 8s and 9s, so it's a different story. But you talking ultra modern, your card has to gem, right? Unless it's super low numbered, right? Like you see a lot of basketball, football, number to 5, number to 25, whatever. If you get a 9, it's okay. But if you're just talking about like a J Rod, like
Even
base
in that
refractor,
situation,
right?
though, like let's say I enter a break and I hit a gold Herbert
Yep.
prism this year, and maybe not Herbert. Let's use Mahomes, who has a handful of cards. Josh Allen, same way. I hit an out of 10. I don't know if I go through the risk of it getting a 9. I
agree.
think I probably just sell it raw and say, hey, this, put in the description, or maybe I can sign it and, let people know, like, I just pulled this card and good luck. You can grade it.
I agree.
Because there's just too much risk and there's not enough upside to the grade. Now, if that's a Justin Herbert rookie out of 10, then you obviously grade it. But I think it's different, different situation based on different.
I agree.
Different
I agree. I mean, I think selling raw nowadays is completely different than it was, 12, 18 months ago, right? When it was more grade everything, right? People will pay a premium because people aren't paying those premiums anymore for 9s, right? And so, and we've seen some scenarios where it seems like PSA is cracking down a little bit on certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be sure that your card's going to gem, and there's some guys out there that you can utilize, like our friend Ronnie at GM Subs, right? That can help you with that. But I agree with you, man.
DCI is another good.
DCI down in Texas.
Yeah, reach out to Jason Dardick, good friend of ours.
Yeah, who we've used quite a bit. But you're right, and a lot of times people underestimate the value of having cash now, right? Versus having. All of us have money tied up in cards, right? I mean, it's just the reality of the situation. Probably me more than I would like to have, but a lot of people underestimate the value of selling something now, having cash now, and then moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes it so that when I pull that Tony Gwynn, I pull that Cal Ripken, I'm actually excited because I'm like, oh, sweet, I'm going to get money back now versus like,
that's right.
It used to be I would pull that and be like, not only is it a letdown, but I'm also not going to see anything back on this Cal Ripken Jr. card for, let's just use the current market, which is PSA saying about 5 to 6 months for bulk. Okay, and now I'm not going to see money back on this Tony Gwynn card for 5 to 6 months. That's a huge bummer. Like, not only was it not what I wanted, but now I also have to wait for it. Now at least I go like, all right, sweet. Like the cards that are decent, like I pulled. You're gonna feel bad for me. I pulled two Gleyber Torres numbered. Like you only get on the box. It says you get 1 refractor in each box. Yeah. It was actually more like 2 to 3. But like in one box, I got a Gleyber Torres out of 10 and a Gleyber Torres out of 35.
I'm sorry.
And I was just like, seriously. But then at the same time, I'm like, okay, but now I'm going to think about the situation. Okay, he's a vet card, but he's on the Yankees. Yankees are going to go to the playoffs, and playoffs are soon. And this is probably going to go to auction like right when the playoffs start. So actually, I'm not as disappointed because I'll make money back in the near term on my flashbacks. Okay. Quick pivot. We've got a little bit of time here left. I do want an opportunity for you not only to plug your thing, but also we can talk about it. So it's been a lot of fun to watch Brooks and just people in the hobby build things. I had recently on this podcast, I had Dan Nothi on, who's DMN Takeover, and I've watched him build his little takeover empire of of stack selling. And I found out he's been doing it since 2013, which is just like super fascinating in and of itself. Yeah. And I'm building stack and this podcast, and you kind of just watch people build their thing. And so Brooks, unlike many of us, has set out to build his thing, which has been this Bowman spreadsheet, which takes a little bit of statistical data mixed with a little bit of Brooks being a baseball guy.
That's right.
And just taking his own brain power to the spreadsheet. So Brooks, tell the audience a little bit about do you have a name for it? What is the Brooks spreadsheet called?
I call it my Bowman prospect Value Finder, which is like the worst title of all time. I got to come up
Yeah,
with
we're
something
gonna have
clever.
to work on that one.
But
I'll jump in there.
yeah, I'll hire you for some help. But ultimately, what it is I a couple months ago I started. Bowman's like my thing, right? Like that's my thing in the hobby where I really enjoy. And I started thinking like, okay, there's got to be a way to evaluate players based on their age, their stats, the market that they're in, and find undervalued players that, I think will rise, right? Buy low, sell high. And on the flip side, there's got to be a way to evaluate these players that I think are good sell now candidates that their stats just don't make sense to me, right? For their prices. And so what I've done so far is create this kind of massive spreadsheet that takes a lot of data inputs, some factors around their age, their position that they play, the market that they play in, like their power stats, their WRC, just a bunch of different stuff, right? And tries to come up with a value for each player that I can then kind of sort through high to low or however you want to dice it and look for kind of those gems in the rough, right? That are, just going crazy. They have crazy stats in AA. They're 19 years old. Their refractor autos are selling for $60, right? Maybe that's a good buy now candidate. So, I've been doing all this and it's been really fun, honestly, because I've been posting updates on Twitter and like, I've gotten all kinds of people from all over that are like, hey, this is super cool. I kind of either have done something similar or
Brooks, you
I have
suck.
some questions.
You hate my player.
Brewers fans hate me because
Churios, right? Yeah.
Churio. Yeah. They're like, you're awful for not ranking him number one all the time. But it's been a really fun project. My goal ultimately is to get it in a website with API calls that hits MLB's official API, with API calls into eBay to pull sales data. And I have a bunch of ideas, but anyway, it's a super cool project. It's, a super pet kind of side thing for me, but,
and for the audience, right? So some of the things that he's taking into consideration is like with Bowman and prospects, it's very much like Leonardo DiCaprio. If they're like over 19, they're old. So like, it's very interesting, right? So like he's taking those things into consideration in his ranking. It's not who's the best, right? Because you could have great players in the minor leagues that are 25 years old. Well, they've been in the minor leagues for 7 years versus a great player who's 18 in the minor leagues. That's huge. Or like my guy that's coming up is Christian Vaquero. Like the kid is 17 years old. That's big because what you want is that Griffey situation where, the A-Rod situation where the guy gets into the majors.
Soto
Acuna, where the guy gets into the majors at 18, 19 years old, and then potentially could have the next 22 years. So more time in the majors than they're currently alive right now, to be able to pad statistics to one day have those amazing Hall of Fame numbers. Now, you probably won't hold the cards until then, but that's what drives value for players. 25-year-old rookies just aren't going to get it done. Separately, you have the market that they play in. The reason Jason Dominguez was a perfect prospect.
Hotly contested. People get really fired up about the market piece.
Right. Oh, yes. And I'm sure. And I want you to talk about that in a second. Just trying to give the audience who may not be big Bowman folks a little bit of background. So like Jason Dominguez, who another big hobby boom guy, was like the perfect prospect. Power, speed, was 17 or 18 years old, and was a New York Yankee. Though that combination is like Bowman perfection, and that's why it shot him up the list. So so why don't you talk a little bit about the markets and the age rankings and how you determine those kind? I think the market thing is pretty.
The market one is so
where
hotly
you
contested.
really piss people off.
People get real fired up at me about this one, but look, it's the reality of the situation. Jason Dominguez is a great example. There's certain markets in the U.S. that are just hotter than others. New York, LA, Chicago, are probably the most prominent ones, right? Like if you take Jason Dominguez and you put him in Oakland, no offense to A's fans, his cars are worth 40% of what they're worth today. You can argue that all you want, but it's almost as close to a fact as you can get.
I can't think of an A's
you can't
prospect in Bowman that's been highly sought after. I mean, we have the Max Muncy kid who's actually pretty good, and his stuff sells for peanuts.
It's just the reality of the situation, right? And there's not many like Oakland that are just kind of dumpster tier, but you have to recognize sorry,
and you
Oakland
wonder
fans,
why people get upset with you.
but you have to recognize the value of a market, right? Like you talked about, the Dominguez thing was a perfect storm because he was in New York. LA's another one, right? You go look at Dodgers prospects down in single A, double A, triple A.
Well, Jose
right?
Ramos, right? Like, I think that guy stinks, and his stuff sells really well because he's a Dodgers prospect. I mean, pretty much all it is.
Chicago, probably more Cubs than White Sox, just to the nature of some of the history, but Chicago's another one. The New York teams are another one. Atlanta to some degree. I mean, there's just certain teams where there's just more desire for the cards. They have bigger fan bases, right? With bigger fan bases comes more hype, more people that want them, right? So you have to take that into account. And so I use what I call a market modifier that says, okay, if you're in New York, Chicago, LA, I'm gonna boost your value by maybe 3 versus if you're in Milwaukee,
Minnesota,
whatever, Minnesota, I'm going to boost your value by 1.5, right? Instead of 3, right? And so it's a personal thing for me that helps.
Rays.
Right.
Well, Rays, for some reason, sell because people just think they're going to be good, and they'll probably be good somewhere else at some point.
Exactly. So for me, and the biggest thing, people freak out, and I have to tell people all the time, like, look, ultimately, this is a tool for me. I'm happy to share with you guys and show you what I'm doing, but you get pissed all you want. I don't care. It's my tool. I'm using it for me. Ultimately, I want to release it to the public someday if anybody wants to use it, but you get mad at me all you want. I don't care. So that's the market piece. The age one that you mentioned is another thing, because the younger, the better. Yeah. Like, the younger, the better, especially if they perform, right? I be honest, I have a filter on my spreadsheet. I don't look at anyone over the age of 23. I just don't care. Right? If they're a Bowman prospect over 23, and 23 is probably pushing it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm probably going to drop it to 22 soon, but I just don't care, right? You're just not going to sell.
Doesn't mean you won't be. Doesn't mean they won't be a good pro.
Doesn't mean you won't be a good player. Same thing. People get real upset about this one too. Is with catchers. Well, I don't even pull pitchers. That's a whole different story. But I do pull catchers, but I usually exclude them, and people get real riled up about it. I'm like, it's just a reality situation, right? Go find me a catcher that has super high value, right? There's some. Don't get me wrong. There's a couple little pieces here and there.
Adley's doing his best to break the mold.
Adley's doing his best. Outside of Adley, the kid that you guys just got for the Nationals, Ruiz, right?
And even Ruiz, I mean, he is, any manager in the majors would take Keibert Ruiz in
all day,
a heartbeat.
All day.
And yet you look at his numbers, they're not going to jump off the page. You have a catcher who doesn't strike out, who has the ability to perfectly, center a pitch or, frame a pitch, has a rocket for an arm, literally like a perfect ball player.
Yep.
And yet you look at his numbers on paper, like mid-tier OPS, not too high of home runs.
It's so hard.
I don't know that anyone outside of Nats fans is going to buy Ruiz cards.
Adley's the exception, not the rule to catchers, right? The catcher value in the hobby is just extremely hard for catchers to put up the kind of numbers that people want to see, right? People want to see home runs. They want to see high OPS. They want to see a lot of RBIs. They want to see those 5-tool guys that are going to steal bases. They've got a cannon for an arm, whatever. That's just not the catcher position, right? Outside of those freak guys like Adley.
And even look at old guys, right? So So let's take this as an example. So probably the greatest selling catcher that you'll ever find is Mike Piazza, right? Played in New York, played in LA. Can you think? I mean, maybe Posey. I would probably
Posey has a niche like
probably Piazza, right?
Yeah.
So let's use this product that I just opened, Finest Flashbacks. I pulled a Ken Griffey base short print, and I pulled a Mike Piazza refractor short print, right?
Yep.
Significantly better card. Both of them are probably peak of their player peak of their position in the 90s. Yep. And I would say the base Griffey will probably outsell the refractor Piazza by like 4 to 5x.
Agreed.
And that is just catchers in a nutshell.
It just is what it is, and it's not a knock on the catchers, right? Like you said, they're still crucially important to the hobby. They can still be great. They can have 20-year careers and be great players, right? That's not what this is about, right? This is about trying to find those diamonds in the rough and then selling them for 3 or 4x. It's the same thing with like first baseman, right? Like if you compare cards for the most part, there's always exceptions. And people are like, well, what about this guy? And I'm like, okay, that's an exception, not the rule. But you compare middle infielders, like a shortstop, second base, and outfielders. Generally, those guys are kind of on the same tier, like hobby-wise. You look at corner infielders, like your defensive specialist, third base. Like, look at Nolan Arenado, right? It's a great example that we kind of pick on all the time, who is a phenomenal player, right? Hall of Famer, however many Gold Gloves he's won, like 8 or 9. It's a freakish number. Hits home runs, hits for power, whatever. His cards sell well, but they don't sell like even Tatis now, after kind of the scandal and the PED stuff and whatever, man. Like,
he'll still outsell Arenado. I personally think that Arenado is screwed more by playing in Colorado because everybody just says, oh, those stats are fake. Like, nobody buys Rockies players, period, because it's like basically every Rockies player is on PEDs according to the hobby.
Dude, another great example on his team is Paul Goldschmidt, who is probably will win MVP in the National League this year. His numbers are absurd.
And then Paul Goldschmidt goes right into your spreadsheet, which is that he played in Arizona. And so any of his rookie stuff is Arizona Diamondbacks.
I weight first baseman lower. Like, and it's not me. It's just the hobby historically has shown that they're not willing.
Completely unfit. Like, if you are getting into the hobby to think that you're going to prospect players and make money based off of actually who's good, you're out of your mind.
You're not. Yeah, there's a certain way you have to think about things. And the flip side of that, I had someone ask me the other day, like, hey, I want to kind of start collecting cards. It's expensive. Like, what should I look? Buy pictures, right? Like, if you want to collect a player and you don't want to spend a lot of money, but you still want to have fun, especially if like somebody that went to your school or like they're from your area or whatever, and you want to like collect someone for cheap, buy pictures. Like, find a picture you like and buy them if you don't want to spend like any money.
Well, because I find this hilarious, we're going to end there on Brooks telling the world to buy pictures.
Don't buy pictures if you want to make money. Don't buy pictures if you want to make money. Buy pictures if you want someone to collect for cheap.
All right. Well, I think this is a good spot to end. We're coming up on our time, Brooks. Where can people go to find you, to find your spreadsheet, to find just where you sell cards?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Same tag is at BHEST Cards, BHEST Cards. Follow me on Twitter. I love talking with people about this kind of stuff. And same thing on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, Brooks, thanks again. I really appreciate you spending some time with me. It was great having you on GoodSellas.
It was awesome. Thanks, JB.
Thanks for listening to GoodSellas. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along wherever you get your favorite podcasts. To learn more about the hobby and how to sell your cards faster and easier, visit us at stacksales.io. We'll see you next time.